Greetings, my name is F.A. Osarin. I am the founder of Doula Chronicles. This has been a week of reproductive futurism. Reproductive futurism has been a virtual gathering in honor of the work of Lorretta and Octavia Butler have laid out for us in their footsteps. We're going to be dreaming and creating what a better future around what pregnancy and birth can look like. As birth workers, we are often on the front lines of this maternal health crisis. We witness near misses, mistreatment from healthcare professionals, and restricted violence all the time. Grieving and mourning is a part of our work, but so is creating anew where it didn't exist before. This is a space to share with your comrades what the future can look like. It's said by one of our favorite elder midwives, Jenny Joseph, who are in the business of saving lives. Let me share the screen. It's different being a presenter versus just having someone else present. All right. Can you guys see my screen? Trying to see if I can see the chat section. All right, Commune and Abolition. It takes a village to raise a child. How many of you have heard about this proverb before? Oh no, what happened? Went off the screen. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, now I can see the chat. I'm trying to make sure I can see the chat while also presenting, but it doesn't look like I can do both at the same time. If anyone's familiar with how I do that, let me know. All right, it looks like I won't be able to see it and present at the same time. It's okay, I'll read it afterwards. Yes, so it is an African proverb, particularly when I researched it, I mostly saw it from East Africa, like Tanzania, Uganda, and a lot of the translations. So I wrote down a couple of the translations. A child does not grow up only in a single home, and that was from Uganda. A child belongs not to one parent or home. Regardless of a child's biological parents, its upbringing belongs to the community. And that's also, those two are from Tanzania. I particularly found, so I guess I give a little backstory and like how this came about. A few years ago, I created this document in midwifery school. It was a day where I might have witnessed several births and coming off a 24-hour shift and feeling, I don't know if for the folks who don't know, I went to midwifery school in El Paso, Texas. So I had to move away from my community and away from friends and family. And it was kind of like an isolating experience learning midwifery. And so I created this document on Google Doc to share with friends on what I was thinking about children, because I was seeing, at least from what I was seeing in my doula work or birth work, where folks, even with the means, were still struggling with raising their children, were still struggling with parenting. So for me, I started to fear what parenting would look like for myself. As I got older, and knowing that my mother had a large village, if you would say, to help raise me and my sisters. We were raised by ourselves. In Nigerian culture, we call everyone auntie and uncle, meaning that whoever is present, the adult or the elder present, is the one who is caring for you and in charge of caring for you and responsible for you. So you could be a good 5, maybe 10 years older than me, and I would call you auntie. And it's a way of showing respect, but also a way of giving responsibility to the people around you. So I was raised by my mom's best friends, my dad's best friends, who I consider my aunts and uncles mostly. And parenting, I remember my mom always saying she didn't understand why people chose to parent by themselves in America. And by yourself as in, you have your partner and you, just 2 people and the children, and how difficult it can be. And I wanted to look into more about what that looked like, knowing that we can't really create that village physically here in the States or in the UK, wherever you're watching from, or Western countries, basically. It was reminding me of what folks have been doing in modern times of how to raise children. So abolition, and as an abolitionist, I do not see why defunding the police as a pathway, excuse me, I think this is in the way. As an abolitionist, I do not see defunding the police as a pathway to abolition. Abolition would necessitate the complete destruction of the US. However, defunding the police is a popular demand that can help build the power, infrastructure, resources, and knowledge to open up abolition possibility. This is a quote from my really good friend, Ninaya. She has been a big influence on how I started to visualize and dreaming what abolition could mean from me as a birth worker. Earlier this year, as the conversation abolition and defunding the police started to be all over our Instagrams, I started seeing how, at least in the birth worker world, as doulas and midwives and providers, we weren't really seeing how abolition pertains to us. And had to introduce the conversation of what would that look like if we were to defund the police? Would we see less maternal mortality? Will we have more birth centers? Will we have more resources and infrastructure for birthing folks, and be able to have places like, this conference, but in a space to where it was now accessible to all? So in this commune, well, before we go into that, who would live in your commune? Tell me in the chats below. Well, actually, I can see the Q&A box. And actually, no, the chat's here now. Are you guys able to see the chat? The shares of chat. You can see the chat, huh? All right, it's okay. So my first question is, who would live in your commune, or what will live in a commune? I guess the definition of a commune is an intentional community of people sharing living spaces, interests, values, beliefs, and often property, possessions, and resources. Sometimes this is also mean they're sharing values and politics as well. You lived in one in 2008, 2009, centered around female pleasure. Nice. Elders, multi-generational, yes. Who else would be on this? A teacher for the kids, yes. It didn't sit to my family in the way I want now, yeah. A midwife, Gardener. I would want to live with my family and partner and people already in collective work around healing and abolition. My partner, my best friend, her family, my cousins, aunts, uncles, and a couple of midwife friends. Family, friends, healers, plant people. Abortus, yeah. Let's see if I can close this chat window down. So here are a couple of ideas. What I wanted to do was have someone create a blueprint, and then I was going to present the blueprint by walking through the space. So what I'm going to have you guys do instead is kind of picture what I'm saying in your mind. We have this plot of land, right? Any size that you want in your mind. And in this plot of land, there's sections all over, right? Buildings and places where people are going to be living and existing. So in my commune, I was experiencing or dreaming of seeing a medicinal kitchen. So like an apothecary that is full of people. So having this outdoor kitchen, right? And we have maybe an outdoor wood oven and community meals. So where we are able to come together and eat together daily or several times a day, depending on what that looked like. People taking turns in cooking, and food coming from the farm of what we're also planning, right? Videos, and that could look like anything: an acupuncture studio, yoga studio, dance studio, library. I've never seen a library on someone's property before, or at least a library for community. We all have our personal books, but having a community of a library would be nice. Shared living spaces. What would be in your commune? If you can picture the outdoor space, like I'm picturing walking out onto a wooden deck, overlooking wildflowers and herbs, vegetables, fruit trees. You know, someone's over there beekeeping. We got a chicken coop, we got goats, fruit orchards, running water, yes, animals, porch swing, hammocks and swings, goats and cats and dogs and horses. You need a lot of land to have horses too, Daisy. Fire pits, yes. Garden, a water, a leak, or a creek. I would like to have like a cast stone wood fire pit. I imagine other communes close by, so I don't have to build anything. So intertwined communes. Oh, that would be nice. I guess I was always thinking of having people who can live there, but also be able to build it as well. I'm crafty, but I'm not crafty enough to build an entire commune. Art studios, yes. Storage, bathtub, an outdoor bathtub would be nice. Water source, a kiln. Yeah, I want to get a kiln. I've been making pottery lately, and would love to just fire my own pieces by myself. Hot tub, and indoor, outdoor spaces. What about meeting rooms and study rooms? Church without walls. Nice. A school, house of worship. What a saltwater pool, sweat lodge. On this document, as I used to travel pre-pandemic a lot, and then I would meet people throughout my travels and folks that I was able to connect with on a political level. I would share this document with them. And so this document is a living document that folks are able to add to throughout the world, wherever they're from. So friends from Colombia, friends from Mexico, friends from Ghana, friends from Uganda have been adding to this document. And they've added places like a turned up space, especially for when there's no weather condition. I think when we're thinking of homes, we forget that we also want to entertain in them. And you want to have like a separate space for entertaining versus, you know, someone in your actual living space. Along the lines of a shared library, a shared clothing closet. Nice, yeah, that would be great. I want to also see a clinic slash birthing commune, if that makes sense, to provide health services, also dental therapy. I had a friend who practices liberation psychology, and it was something that I wish everyone could have a big space for eating and cooking together, a party space where a lot of people can dance with great lighting. Research, laboratories, sperm banks. Yesterday, during one of the presentations on sperm donors, was finding out that it was very, very expensive and very limited to what type of people who donate sperm. So I guess I would have a sperm bank on my commune that includes folks of color of all ranges, childcare, child center. We'll get to what childcare can look like on a commune because it's more expansive than someone just babysitting. Definitely healing space and create space, tools, and equipment to do any projects, low tech and high tech. Yes. I think about how we could wipe out poverty, homelessness, and most of our education gaps with a few resources. Shifts a lot, and we could all spend more time being creative, doing hobbies, and just being happier. This is a quote from a friend, Butler. She had posted this on Facebook a good maybe 4 years ago, and I screenshot it and I saved it. Didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew that it was something that I was really thinking of. And at the time, there was a celebrity suicide. What's his name? His name is missing me. He did a movie dressed up in drag. And Jumanji, what was his name? Robin Williams, yes. So Robin Williams was a comedian that I loved and adored as a child, right? And would watch those movies over and over and over and over. Mrs. Doubtfire, that's the movie. And when he died, I was so shocked. And I was just in this space of where, and I think someone else had died recently, another death by suicide some months later. This guy was a chef. He traveled around and had a whole show about cooking and eating foods from throughout the world. Also a suicide. And Anthony Bourdain, yes. And I was so confused because we're raised in this world to believe that we're supposed to make this money, get as close to as much money as you can possibly can, right? And then buy the resources that you need so that you will be happy. But these were men or people who were able to do that and were not happy, were still depressed. And I think about how they were also stuck in this capitalist silo of constantly having to perform, constantly having to be a producer or a consumer in this society. And when I saw this quote by Brooke, I knew that I wanted to start creating this doc on what I wanted, where I would like to live, and how if we're able to write about poverty and homelessness and these education gaps, what we will spend our time with on now. During this pandemic, I had found time to do things that I've never done before. I found time to create pottery. I found time to cook more, to tend to my plants, because I didn't have to commute anymore. And it was just that little couple hours throughout my day where I was not able to fill in with more things. And now I'm imagining if I didn't have to work, or if my work was considered also a pleasure, also giving back in that ways, how much more fulfilled can I be in that space? Like, when you think of this quote, what comes up for you? Imagine if you didn't have all of these other barriers, would your mind be more expansive on what creativity looks like? And how much more longevity would your patches and knowledge fill? Yeah. Not even just your lifespan, but like what you can actually create at that time and who can benefit from it. I particularly, we already went through who lives here, did we? We can go through it again. I wanted to share a little bit more on, I guess, a more expansive of who could live there. We talked about teachers, we talked about farmers and midwives, yes. Oh God, oh my God, the possibilities are endless. Storytellers, orphans. I think about the people who say that if we didn't exist in a capitalist system, people would have no drive for innovation. It's the complete opposite. We'll have so much more inspiration and time for creation. Yes, scientists. Archivists. I met an archivist, a Black archivist in Ghana, and she, by way of Houston, Texas. And what she does is she just collects Black history. If we can have, record keepers, if we could have someone keeping down our stories. I often think about what if we didn't have to fight all this fucking oppression. Yeah. I would also, let me see. What about having architects and chefs, a woodworker, someone who builds, accountants, therapists, healers, a seamstress, a historian, designers, carpenters. I would imagine my commune to be self-sufficient, and all of them to be self-sufficient in that ways that anything that we're needing, we are able to give to ourselves in this space. People who can teach self-defense. Yeah, and like most people will be able to have dual, or multiple skill sets. So your archivist could also be a midwife. Your farmer could also be a designer. Your organizer could also be a dancer. Your chef could also be, a nurse. So I follow Miriam Makeba on Twitter. Did anyone else follow her work? She is an abolitionist, and at least within our millennial generation, who I find so inspiring. And this quote from her, "Everything worthwhile is done with other people." I did not learn until moving to New York how much community is necessary, how when you try to do everything by yourself, you will end up with burnout and you end up crashing, which has been a big theme with, this conference and the panels with a lot of birth workers having so much burnt out and not knowing how to avoid what that burnout looks like. I had a client this morning who, she actually delivered the beginning of the pandemic, before, when we weren't allowed in a hospital. So I want to say like March or April. And she texted me this morning about the NAP ministry. And I was like, yes. And she said that her signs of depression and postpartum stress started to just swallow away when she took a nap every day. And when she started to ask for help, when she allowed someone else to care for her and care for her family. And so the large idea of this commune is, you can't do this by yourself. We can't live in society alone. There's been a large, I won't say large, but there has been a popular theme right now with people wanting to escape. Escape where? Not sure where, but there's this idea of like, I need to escape what's happening. I need to escape the election. I need to escape racism. I need to escape oppression. And escaping alone, no one is really thinking about, how do I take people with me? And how do I create more where I'm going and create better where I'm going? Yes, absolutely love this quote. Come back to it frequently. Yes, it's a good one. So we get into birthing and raising children, which was the large theme about why I wanted to create, why I do want to create a commune, because I particularly myself do not want to parent one other person. I don't think it's very sufficient when the birthing person is tired, and then when the partner is tired, where does the child go, right? It would be great if that child was now able to, well, I'm just going to go to the farm because Jessica's out there, and maybe Jessica can help me with what I'm feeling or talking through this. And if Jessica is busy, then maybe we can go see Daisy in the kitchen. And if Daisy's busy, then there's another option too. Well, maybe I'll go out to the studio and see what Charles is doing out there. The idea is to give this child a very well-rounded upbringing and protection. My favorite are the Europeans who want to escape back to Europe. You learn so much from watching your peers while you parent. Yeah, I think that's the biggest, for me, it's mostly like watching my friends parent and watching what I don't want to happen, or wish that I could help them change for them. So the first one is, everyone is responsible for guiding and providing for the children. Hence, it takes a village to raise a child. There's this idea that the only people that are supposed to take care of the children are the parents and your hired help, right? Even if your hired help are your siblings, your hired help are your family members, that you're paying someone to watch your children versus someone who is loving that child is also watching that child. More trusted adults are needed for our children's development. Yeah, right, because there's only so much that you are able to provide. Yeah, so there's only so much that you are able to provide in capacity of emotional capacity and mental and physical ability. And then there's personality development, right? Imagine what this child can now do when they're around so many different skill sets and personalities and conversations throughout their days. Positive parenting. Who practices positive parenting, or who's heard of positive parenting? %50 of the time, okay. What are you doing the other 50% of the time? I mean, I imagine that it's difficult to do 100% of the time without the assistance of others. When I read about positive parenting or unschooling, I'm always curious to who is helping people do this. Because what happens when you're tired? You know, what happens when Mercury's in retrograde? What happens when there's a full moon or a new moon? What happens when there's a storm? What happens when you are not your best self? How is that child going to get that 100% of what they need? I can be a bit of a disciplinarian. Yeah. Yes, but no one to tap out to. I'm solo most of the time. It's gritty as fuck. It's real. It's really real. And I do, and I agree that it isn't up to just the two of us. Parenting in our society is lonely. How we live is lonely. You know, we all get in our apartments, our houses, our homes. We close the doors, lock the doors, and only the people inside are the people you not communicate with. I mean, now we have social media and so forth, but you're in this enclosed shell versus if you have this home where everything is more, you know, again, the no walls. I definitely agree it's lonely. I would love to live in a commune. Yes, so this would allow more time. By taking care of your community, you build the relationships, then you trust your children to be safe in. My parents weren't retired yet when I had kids, but now that my mom is retired, I drop my 8 and 11-year-old to her every chance I get. I was always dropped off with aunts and grandparents. But what about your parents? Do they get tired? There's one thing I always hear my mom or just most Black mothers say, you know, I raise my children. I'm not going to raise your children too. You know, you can drop them off for a couple of hours, but never, what if you want to take a week break or 2 weeks? 2 weeks away from parenting, 4 months away from parenting, and not have to feel this guilt of who is helping my child or guilt of I'm not a parent anymore because I'm not with them. When you open up the possibility that everyone is a parent, everyone is responsible for this child, you can step away when you're able to. I'm part of my brother and sister-in-law's childcare structure. We struggle trusting people with the kids. I don't know if I would do it so much in America than the comfort that I would have in a space where children being abused and culture is not as, I don't know, popular, I guess, is that a word that I could use for that? Yes, the grandparents you have to protect by not dropping the kid off too much. And then birthing space commune. I imagine this commune to also be a birthing commune. So it's a place where we live, and it's also a place where people raise children and birth their children. And then possibly in the end, bury their children or their children bury them, all on the same land, all in the same space, and not having to, I have so much guilt having other folks watch my kids, unsure where that comes from. It's taught to us, it's conditioned to us. And every commercial and every TV show is telling us this is how you're supposed to parent. And if you don't parent this way, you should feel bad about yourself. If you don't parent this way, you should punish yourself for doing it this way. And then we take in all of that and condition. I mean, if we were watching these shows and commercials and propaganda since we were children, the messages are everywhere. The messages are on billboards. The messages are from your friends, from your family, from people that you see throughout your days. I mean, as birth workers, we definitely see them from the providers and nurses and doctors and how they tell us what they think we should do. Sustainability and eco-socialism. This is a big part of the commune because if we wanted to be self-sufficient, we would have to be self-sufficient, right? But we also want to make sure that we are taking care of the earth. So who's familiar with permaculture? A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I've been studying via YouTube videos. Is that a thing? Can you be a student from YouTube videos? I've been studying permaculture from an ecosystems via YouTube University. But the definition that I looked up is permaculture is a set of design principles centered on whole system thinking, simulating or directly utilizing the patterns and resilient features observed in natural ecosystems. It uses these principles and in a growing number of fields in regenerative agriculture, rewilding, and community resilience. So basically it's a setup, right? You want to have it in sections, you know, like this section is where we live, this section is where we grow our food, this section is where we tend to the animals, this section is where we eat, and you want to have a balance of it. So in this permaculture, we also would use solar energy and solar gas. It wasn't until I started traveling more that I realized that I saw and witnessed that solar was everywhere. And that in America, or at least Western countries, solar is for the wealthy, for the privileged. Yes, we are very, very behind, as much as we feel that we are the best country in the world because we have all this hoarded wealth. That wealth is for a select few and they get to use these things, but not the rest. Where I was in, you know, just driving throughout Uganda and going from city to city to city and seeing places that were all lit up via solar energy. So using, yeah. What was that? I think I just saw a comment. Then there's solar gas, you know, that you could save your food waste, your compost waste, and turn that into energy, and it can light up your homes, light up your commune in that way, and not having to worry about living on the grid and paying off those bills and being stuck again in that capitalist society of making you a machine. When I was researching other communes that are alive today, a lot of them function based off being a like a factory or something, you know, like the entire commune works at this little, you know, business inside the commune that sells goods to like Whole Foods or wherever you go get your natural products from, your natural and organic products from. And while I saw the reasoning for that, it just made me kind of sad. Like, you escape, but you still have to participate in your escape. It was as if they just created another society within the society, but they're still participating in how the society wants us to participate in that society. Does that make sense? There was no freedom of movement and a range of thought of what they could possibly do. It was, we just took our capitalist mindset and now we're doing it in a smaller portion of people. So instead of millions of people, we're gonna do it within, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40 of us together. And then zero waste practices. So this has been controversial lately because the wealth have got a hold of it and saying things of like, well, if we get rid of plastic straws and if we get rid of get rid of plastic straws and bottles, then we will lessen our carbon footprint and reduce our use of waste. But we all know now how it is. I think, I know that it's ableist. There is someone on Instagram, her name is it Zero? I think it's Zero Waste Habesha. And I will, yeah, definitely. She talks a lot about how zero waste practices are necessary, right? But also zero waste practices are indigenous or traditional or practices that we've always had, and that the access of hoarding that we live in today, or constant consuming, constantly buying things, constantly having not enough storage space, was taught to us. And that if we, now what's being taught to us is zero waste, what's being taught to us is minimalism, when that has always been present in our cultures. And then recycling rainwater. If you were able to create, so I saw this one video where the gutter was created for the rainwater to come down into this kind of pond. And so in that pond, you know, they had fish and other species that they were able to eat from, that also took care of the farm. But then that water also was able to flush their toilets, wash their dishes, also drink from that water. And then that same water was then used to water their plants and so forth. And they were able to recycle that water continuously. Again, yes, with more rainwater for sure. But in that space to where there was no, we are out of water. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago, maybe not a few, maybe just a year or so ago, it was places like California, South Africa had ran out of water. There was a water shortage. And the scarcity model that we are going to run out of space, we're going to run out of food, we're going to run out of water, is white supremacy, right? There's an abundance of this always existing. Yes, rainwater recycling still actively practiced in villages around the world. One of the main water collection in a place I lived in, Ghana. And we're being fed this propaganda that all of these resources are becoming little and little, and then we're going to have to fight each other, when the real enemy is those who are hoarding those resources. It's not less resources. It's mostly about how we're getting access to those resources and who's taking the access from us. Almost done. You have to ask for the impossible to get half the possible, and don't pre-compromise yourself. And then call something a victory that you didn't even want in the first place. This quote particularly spoke to me, and why I created Reproductive Futurism, or I didn't create it, someone else did, but why I wanted to expand more on what that meant for me and my community, and those who are also in the community with us, is to dream a little bit bigger. And then also realizing that our dreams are very short-sighted, that our dreams are covered and sheltered, that we are lacking that creativity. So that goes back to that quote that Brooke had said about, if we did not have to live in this space of scarcity of capitalism, what would our minds now be able to do? And that's it. Thank you all for joining me today. Are there any questions that we can get to? You can find me on, well, I feel like if you're watching this, because you already know where to find me, but you can find me on Twitter or Doula Chronicles Instagram page as well. What lessons can we learn from communes in past generations? Are they disbanding or breaking apart community? I'm not sure, are they disbanding or breaking apart community? Could you expand a little bit on that last part? Particularly just thinking about the longevity of communes, what can we learn from the ones that didn't last? I think the ones that didn't last, I mean, I'm not sure, I don't know if there's any studies on this, but in my opinion, I think they didn't last because they isolated themselves. They didn't last because as society exists on the outside, it's still a capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal space, right? And as long as that exists, as long as we forget about abolishing those systems, it will eventually, crumble. So yes, these, what we saw in the 70s, particularly, for example, Anime Gaskin's farm, right? Why, yes, the farm exists still kind of today, but not in the same capacity that it did then. And that's because a bunch of white hippies thought they could be white hippies by themselves and continue living that way while the rest of us suffered, or while the rest of us were oppressed and murdered and killed. And so yeah, I think that's kind of why I think, what my opinion on why they didn't last and what we can do differently. That's why it's in the title of this presentation. It's Commune and Abolition, right? And so we do have to put our energy in the spaces of abolishing these systems, not just defunding the police, but abolishing the police and abolishing, I mean, after today, or was it yesterday? Abolishing the Supreme Court is now a conversation that I would like to see more of, because it's completely, I don't want to get too much into the election because that's just going to annoy the fuck out of me. But we're seeing how, again, what the propaganda that like we can change this if we all participate as citizens, and now realizing that we really don't have access to changing what that looks like, right? And so that means the whole damn system has got to go, particularly. Any other questions? If not, you're always welcome to DM me. If you are watching this and you have the resources to help us create our birthing communes, please let me know. And I will see you guys on the last presentations of today of Birthing Without White Supremacy with our panel. I'm gonna stop screen share. And yeah, peace.